My name is Mary Siddell Walker, and I was born at home in New Albany, Mississippi, and it's the Pleasant Grove community. And my grandmother delivered me. She actually delivered all of us. I have 10 brothers. There's one who's deceased. His name was Danny. He passed away back in 2017. And I guess the thing that's unique with our family, all of my brothers, is that all of our names start with D. You know, some of them it may be the middle name, but we all have the D there. And so my middle name is Demetrius, which is what most of my family call me. And my older brother was actually named, his name is Quincy, so he's the only one who doesn't begin with a D. And so he was actually named after one of my dad's military buddies because my dad did, um, he was in World War II. And I guess that was a case with, a lot of the people during that time because he graduated from B.F. Ford, but at that time, I think it was called the Union County Training Center. So he graduated in 1942. I sort of ended up becoming interested in basketball because my dad was always into sports. And as a matter of fact, he had like a gold tooth that was sort of a trademark of his because he got his tooth knocked out. I don't remember if it was because of baseball or basketball. So he was definitely, just an avid sports fan. And he even had like a nickname, which was Steamboat, because of just the sports that he was involved in. So that was one of my motivations, but um, I guess it was influenced more when I started school at Ingomar because, it's a whole different, I guess everyone sort of breathed and, basketball. And I think that's the case for like all the county schools. And it was a lot of competition with that. So it's very important to the community. So with that motivation of both like my dad and also just with the school, with the influence, that's what got me started with playing basketball. And I also have like, quite a few cousins that were males that the basketball court was like right next to my grandmother's house. So I played a lot with them, also Francis Green. And so that was one of our favorite pastimes when, my dad didn't have us working in the fields because we did have a farm. And so that was the motivation of that. And I started playing basketball probably in fifth or sixth grade. As soon as I came to Ingomar. And then I continued to play in middle school and I played on the high school team as well. Well, I actually started at B.F. Ford in first grade. And I think the integration started for us, and we had an option of going to Ingomar when I was third grade. And so my dad was very active in civil rights. And he was assuming that everyone was going to go when I was in third grade, which was about 1964, I think. But it ended up that our family was the only family who had started. So it was very short lived. It was about 3 days, and then we came back to B.F. Ford. And then when I was fifth grade, everyone came because it became mandatory. There was somewhat of a threat, and that's why he moved us back. So it seemed as if when we went that everyone was really friendly and that there wasn't any opposition, with the students. But with the bus route that we were on, there was one afternoon that even though we weren't the last people who were supposed to be getting off the bus, all of a sudden I looked up and my four brothers and I were the only ones on the bus. And, when I looked around, I was thinking, this doesn't look like it's part of our bus route. And so it turns out, that it wasn't. So the bus driver was saying, oh, there's something wrong with the bus. And so I guess just with sort of having a sense of the environment, because we knew that a lot of things were going on, John F. Kennedy being killed, with the civil rights and all that, that even though my parents didn't talk to us a lot about it, we saw the news. And so we knew about that. And so my brothers and I, we were sort of just all silent. And I'm thinking that we were all thinking the same thing. And we weren't really sure what was going to happen. Um, but I guess I never had a sense of fear or anything because, with being third grade, I guess it was out of ignorance that I was thinking that, um, if he tried to attack us or if more people come, then we would be dying for a cause. And so that was, sort of my feeling. And but then when we got home, it turned out that there were a group of people, there waiting. They knew that we should have been there a long time ago. So at that point, my father pulled us out of Ingomar and we went back to be at Ford for 2 more years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. Again, I guess it was the point that we never were really, afraid. And because we didn't live that far from like Medgar Evers. And my dad was very, I guess, involved again in civil rights with some of the freedom riders that came down, Fannie Lou Hamer, um, Medgar Evers. And then just recently, I'd heard about from one of my brothers, there's on PBS, there's a story, it's about the Mississippi spies. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. PBS did a special. So it turned out that the government at probably the state level and federal level were spying on the secret meetings that I guess, Blacks were having. And it was an inside job somewhat. And so, what was really sort of amazing with that was that my brother was watching it, and all of a sudden, there's a picture of my dad. That he was at one of the meetings, like him, and also one of his friends, Mr. McKenzie, as well. And so, obviously, it was someone from the inside. And I guess they still don't know who it was who was the insider, but they were assuming that it was this one person because when they were referencing it, whoever that person was that was reporting, his name was the only name that was missing. So that's why they came to the conclusion that it was maybe him who was feeding the information.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your dad was, I mean, he was there in basically Ingomar or in the county of Union County,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of secretly but actively involved in the civil rights movement that was coming through Mississippi, the Freedom Riders and everything.
Yeah, definitely. Because also it's really amazing that I think it was within the last 5 years or so, they finally released a lot of those letters and communications from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So there were handwritten letters that my dad had communicated back and forth to them.
Wow. I wonder,
So yeah, that was amazing.
how did your dad get involved with that? Do you think it was oh, I had how do you know how he got involved?
Um, I guess he always felt strongly about voting. And it was also interesting that even with his high school class, I was surprised because he was from the county and it was a lot of, people from the city that were on the picture, but he was listed as their business manager. And he just always had, I think, a passion about that. And also, there was another picture of him that we found where he think they formed the first strike maybe in this whole state of Mississippi because he was working at Layers. And so it's a battery company. So the conditions were very bad there. And so I think that's why, that it wasn't really about the money. It was more so with the conditions. And so he went, I guess he was with that strike, he was off work for like several months and they never called him back. But I guess it was just a point of, realizing that in order to make change, there had to be sacrifices. And so he was a very peaceful person. And I think that the church was central to a lot of the civil rights movements and, just love of community and with a village and with, that even though he was working at a factory, I think his main point was, hoping that more people could get jobs, but then sort of overall for everyone that, um, there were just more opportunities.
What was your dad's name?
His name was Leanze Siddell.
And you said he worked at a battery. I've never heard the name of that place you said.
It's Lahr, Lahr, I think. So it was there in New Albany.
What a hero, your dad.
Yes. But there were, I think there were a lot of heroes because it was also, the whole community, and that's the way it's been with the support system. And I think that that's probably why I felt more comfortable, going to Ingomar because we still had that village and that community. For example, with Miss Mary Beasley being my cousin, Miss Ludi Williamson, they came to Ingomar, so they were still there. And then also one of, like my mom's sister was a school teacher at BF Ford. So even though she didn't come to Ingomar, it was a point that she was family, so you still had that support. So that made a big difference. And I think you also interviewed Mr. Lee Russell Howell. And so they were always a big part of the community because his wife actually taught, both he and his wife, they gave free piano lessons to anyone that wanted it. So I took piano from her. And so also they had what's called a community choir that covered 3 counties. And it was for kids that were probably elementary through high school or young adults. And we met weekly. So they were a big part. And I think Mr. Lee Russell Howell also mentioned Miss Rosie Shackelford. She was also a big part of my life because my dad enjoyed singing, and Miss Rosie Shackelford actually played the piano for a quartet for them. And so when I started playing piano, she was sort of there mentoring me, with the singing that he would do, with letting me play sometimes. So again, you just have all these people that are there supporting you in all the different areas. When I first started at Ingomar, I think the thing that stood out the most with that is that my parents didn't have a problem with me playing in middle school, but then when I was getting ready to start high school, that's when my grandmother, was sort of this firm thing with where she was, saying that, okay, this is where you cut it off. You need to start doing your studying. So don't let her go out for the team. And so fortunately, there were 3 votes on it because my dad was in agreement with my grandmother, so I wasn't going to get to play, but then my mom sort of trumped and came into my support, and supported me. So that's why I was able to go out for basketball. And I think the thing that stood out is like Coach Ashley was our coach, and I think that was maybe his second year there because he had graduated from college, I think when he was 20. And the thing that I remember most about him that sort of stood out is that um, there were a lot of people who went out for basketball. Some had to go back to the study hall and didn't make the cut. But then the next cut was that, you could still play, but it was the point of whether or not you got a suit because usually it was anywhere from 10 to 14 people. And so I remember him like giving 10 suits, and then he said, I still have 2 more that I'm going to give out. And um, you can come, he told the whole team that they could come to him and talk individually on what they needed to do between, it may be like 2 or 3 weeks before the season started, that he would be giving those additional suits out. And so with me being a ninth grader, I was thinking, no, I shouldn't even go and ask. But then it was a thing of like, okay, what do I have to lose? And so when I walk in, there's like, I'm really scared. And so I asked him. And so he sort of looked up at me and he seemed like surprised when I asked, well, what do I need to do? And he said, well, you're a really great player. You're doing everything right, but it's just that you're ninth grade. So, I just want to give other people who are older an opportunity to make the team. But I guess he must have really thought about it more because it turned out that the suits that were left, he ended up giving them to all ninth graders. And so, I felt that that really paid off. And it had a really big influence because, it's a thing of where it taught me a lesson of where you never give up and don't be afraid of failure and just always ask on what do I need to do to get better at whatever I do. So that applies to basketball and to life. And then I also remember Coach Hooker. I think he was there like when I was elementary school and he coached us somewhat. And I think one of his big quotes was that you have to have determination. You got to have the right attitude because it's 95% effort and the other 5% is skill. So that really stuck with me with basketball. And also, just with basketball, it was a thing of where you nearly felt like you became a celebrity with playing because everyone looked up to you, especially the kids. And so I remember that's how I got my first summer job because it was this younger kid who had like a crush on all the people on the basketball team. And he came up to us and said that, hey, I can get you guys a summer job. My mom's a supervisor if you want to work. So, that was wild. And then, it's even part of like the class, you got motivated like when you're in class because people would, sort of rib you, especially if they had a girlfriend or something that was on one of the county teams. And so, you're either like when you came back to class, you're either a hero or either like everybody's like, oh, well. So, it was definitely part of the community. And so it was something that was very important. And I feel that we, put a lot of time in it. And it also, um, I feel that it did bring us together as a community because, it was there and it was part of like, you know, whether it was people at the job, they talked about it, no matter what school their kids went to. So it was definitely a part back then and it still is. And for every game, just about the gyms were packed. I know that it meant a lot to the community. I think it was when I was a senior that we won the Ingomar tournament because our coach would usually put Holka in it because they always went to the finals. And so we didn't play Holka in the final of in the tournament because I think either West Union or East Union girls had put them out, but then we were able to win the tournament. So that meant a lot.
What's the farthest your team went while you were playing?
Uh, well, with me as a starter, my senior year, I think we probably got put out north at North Half, but with playing ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, the people that were playing when I was ninth grade was Shirley Hall, Becky Tate, and Patty Walls. So they obviously were going to state just about every year. It was also Janet Doom. So with me playing for 4 years, I still remember like it may have been my ninth or 10th grade year, we had 5 people on our team that made the all-star team. I started out at Northeast Mississippi Junior College because I think that everyone in our class, except maybe one person, that they sort of recruited us all to go to Northeast. So we all started out there. And then after going to Northeast, I was in Lake Charles for a short time in Louisiana. And it was because there were courses that I needed to take in order to get into a program that was at University of Maryland at Baltimore. And so I ended up there because I have an older brother who was already living in the DC area. And I chose the program that I did because I wanted to eventually be a doctor. And so that's why I ended up at University of Maryland. And I ended up not going that route, but I guess the program, that's what sort of drove me to coming up to the DC area. And also, it's sort of weird or strange that I know that my brother up here, that he's not a distractor, but then with having friends down in Mississippi, it was a point of, staying focused and sort of keeping my eyes on the whole plan and the prize of what I wanted to do and be. I ended up after doing University of Maryland, and then I got a master's in Georgetown while I was working. I got a master's in radiation science. So I became a radiation safety officer. And I in doing that, I was working for the National Institute of Standards and Technology and then for the Food and Drug Administration. And so I provided technical support and things of that sort to inspectors that inspect all of the different type of X-ray units that are out in the field, whether it's hospitals, clinics, or whatever, with looking at the quality, the radiation, and all that. So I handled the equipment, provided technical support, and just sort of an overview of everything. No, I actually retired after 32 years in February of 2021. And I still do volunteer work. And then I've become licensed in health and life insurance. And so my main focus is Medicare because I just feel like a lot of seniors are taken advantage of. And so it's a point of educating them and then also making sure that they have the best plan, the best fit for them, with making sure that all of their medications are covered, their doctors are covered, and they're paying the minimal amount for that. And, with all the benefits that are available with dental, and they could vary from plan to plan, and it could make a difference of thousands of dollars for them. So that's been my main focus. And our daughter is currently in school and she's working on her PhD, but she's on the West Coast. At least once a year, I guess when my parents were alive, especially when they were getting, like older, I would try to make it down a couple of times a year.